Welcome, welcome. On the screen, you'll see the session needs. You'll just need some paper and something to write with. Ooh, we're getting more people. Hello. Hi, everyone who's joining in just now. Please just take a look at the screen for the session needs. You'll need some paper and anything to write or draw with. Well, it's 12:02. Should we get started? Yep, I see it. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Moments with Art. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tanya Espinosa Bonilla. I'm the Art Across Curriculum Educator at the Haggerty Museum of Art, and I'm joined by Christine Fleming, who's the Manager of Community Engagement.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. So we would just like to highlight before we start that this session is going to be recorded. So please feel free to, turn off your cameras or turn them off as you see fit. And we will be asking everyone to mute their mics for the duration of the session until there is a section of this session where we will be asking you all to participate and unmute yourselves. But please feel free to drop any comments or any questions or anything at all on the chat throughout the session. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce the theme of this session, which is surrendering judgment. So what do we mean when we say surrendering judgment, right? This basically just means the ability to allow ourselves and others to just be, right? Surrendering judgment is about releasing ourselves from what we think should be and allow things to be exactly what they are without labeling it and without adding preconceived notions to it. So when we live our lives without judgment, we really open the door for more empathy, more inclusion, more acceptance, and more love in our lives. So I will pass it on to Christine, who's going to do our land acknowledgements.
Perfect. Mary, if you can go to the next slide, please. So each session will be featuring a different land acknowledgement. Although we're coming to you virtually, we are all sitting or standing or laying or however you are joining us today. We're in a specific location, and we thought it would be a great way to start to give an acknowledgement. So this session, we're using our Haggerty Museum of Art land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Haggerty Museum of Art is on the traditional homelands of the Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk Indian nations, who have known this land as a relative for millennia, and who remain our hosts on it. We also recognize the presence in Milwaukee of tribal members from 9 other Wisconsin nations, including the Oneida Nation, the Stockbridge Munsee Community Band of Mohicans, and the Brothertown Indian Nation and the 6 Ojibwe nations. Like I said, each week we'll feature a different one. Please feel free to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from if you are local or if you're joining us from another state, and take a moment to acknowledge the place that you live in and its historical inhabitants. Be thankful for those that called your location home and cared for it before you did. And I'll drop in the chat the link to where to find our land acknowledgement. Each of those different tribal bands has a kind of link where you can go to learn a little bit more about the people who were on the land of the Haggerty Museum before us. So with that, I will kick it back over to Tanya for our first mindful exercise.
Yes, so to start off, can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. To start off, I did want to just provide a quick mindfulness exercise, which we're calling mindful observation. And it's really just about noticing things in your surrounding without preconceived notions, without needing to add thought to it. It's basically just letting things be noticed and be. All right, so without further ado, if we can go to the next slide.
The activity of mindful observation requires us to notice things as they are and as they come. For the purpose of today's session, we'll be using the term seeing. However, we understand and acknowledge the multiple ways in which we perceive and the diverse abilities of all individuals. Therefore, anytime we say see, you can apply touch, smell, hear, or even taste to whatever you are shifting your focus to. Mindful observation is a simple exercise requiring only a window with some kind of view or an object to focus on, such as food, a pencil, or even a person. To start, find room at a window or within your space where you can focus on this one view or one object. Look at everything there is to see. Avoid labeling and categorizing what you see outside the window or what the object looks like, feels like, tastes like, and so on. Instead of thinking bird or stop sign or apple, try to notice the colors, the patterns, or the textures. Pay attention to the movement of the grass or leaves in the breeze. Notice the many different shapes present in the small segment of the world you can see. Try to see the world outside the window or inside your home from the perspective of someone unfamiliar with these sights. Be observant, but not critical. Be aware, but not fixated. If you become distracted, gently pull your mind away from those thoughts and notice a color or a shape or a pattern or movement, again, to put you back in the right frame of mind. Let's spend about 1 to 2 minutes practicing this exercise on our own, and we will group back afterward.
Okay. That was actually quite an interesting experience for me. I've done this a few times before, and I had never done this exercise by my window, and I noticed a few things from my neighbor's home that I just hadn't before. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If you had any insights or just noticed new things that you hadn't before, feel free to drop them in the chat. For now, keep this exercise in mind because we will be using aspects of it later on, but I will turn it over to Christine for an artist investigation.
Fabulous. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'm trying to still pull up my notes with the screen share swap around. My computer is having a bit of a moment, so we'll go through as much as I can from memory, and then hopefully my notes will pop up. Today we're going to be focusing on the work of Tom Woodall, who's an artist that we have in our collection. He's a contemporary artist. He has a great website that you can click and view his current works. He keeps it pretty well up to date, which is really nice. My research area was 18th century artists, so it's always nice when you have a contemporary artist that you can actually see pictures of and hear audio, which we will in a little bit. A little bit about Tom Woodall. He is an artist that was born in 1948 in a town called Cochabamba, Bolivia. He immigrated to California at the age of just 10 in 1958. And after moving to California, he actually did his BFA at a school in California called the Couchenard Art Institute in 1970. He is a practicing painter, but also uses mixed media. His artwork is in a variety of different collections across the United States, including some big names like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the Contemporary Museum of Art in Los Angeles, California, and also the Hagerty Museum of Art in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just to name a few. So I want you to ponder about the judgments or the things that you are making, assumptions that you are making about this artist with just the information that I've shared. The information that I've shared is usually what we can kind of glean from labels that you might see in a gallery. And drop in the chat box things you think you might know about this artist based on the picture, his location, the bits of information that I've shared so far. Ah, yes, good, very good observation or judgment, Tanya, that this artist probably can speak Spanish. Yes, Bolivia, if you pull it up, has a variety of different languages that are spoken. Spanish is the official language, but I would be curious, I would make the assumption that potentially he speaks more than just Spanish and English even. Any other assumptions or judgments we might have? Well, you can continue to drop them in the chat as you think of them. Oh, interesting. Yeah, especially the focus of his work, thinking about his birthplace or wondering of his adoptive home, kind of him making sense. Oh, that's an interesting idea too, Tanya, that he probably would travel back and forth between his kind of home country, home location, and where he immigrated to in California. Perfect. Well, I'll go on, but if you think of more things, feel free to continue dropping them in the chat. What we're going to be reflecting on today is not just his artwork, but also this idea of identity. And that is why we're talking about these judgments, the little bits that we usually find out about an artist. We start to create in our minds a kind of identity almost for the artist. And this is just one visual of this, the kind of aspects that go into or parts of an identity. And I want you to kind of ponder the different things in this circle, these different parts. There are some things when we're thinking about personal identity that are also worth thinking through the way that we view ourselves or our self-identity versus the identity that other people kind of associate, the judgments that we make or assumptions we make about people. Yeah, that mixed emotions, it feels truly fits in with one place or another. And we'll actually talk about that in terms of him viewing himself as an artist. That is very, very well spotted, Sarah. So with this in mind, I thought it would be interesting. And then I found this great photograph. So this artist, Rena Small, took a photograph, a portrait of Tom Woodall and just his hands. And I love this idea of artists that are kind of challenging or highlighting things that we don't normally spend a lot of time with. I think artists have this special talent to see the world in a different way than we do. And so this photograph is of Tom Woodall's hands, just a few years before he painted the artwork that we're going to be looking at today. And so you really don't need for a portrait to see someone's face, to see, you know, the traditional kind of head and shoulders portrait, a half portrait, the full length portrait. It can literally just be hands that kind of are filling in as identity for somebody. And with those hands, Tom Woodall made this painting that we're going to be focusing on today. I have hidden the name of the artwork to surrender our judgment a little bit further of the assumptions that we're making, but Tom Woodall made this painting in 1992. It is made with oil on canvas, And it came into the collection in 2001. It was a gift by Peter Norton, so thank you to Peter. He actually donated 2 artworks in our collection. So we are very lucky to have an additional painting painted just a year before our focus artwork. Also oil on canvas, also a gift of Peter Norton. So we're very lucky with a lot of the artworks that we have that they were gifted to the museum. And I thought because we have 2 works that are so similar, it would be interesting to kind of do a comparative analysis. Are there elements that you are noticing, colors, themes, the sort of composition? What are you seeing? And you can feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. Let's just kind of come up with a list, and we can start with kind of simple things. What do you notice that is similar?
I think kind of the composition, it kind of seems like everything is free falling and there's not any sort of definite concrete surface that they're sitting on.
I love that's very, very well spotted. It's kind of floating. There isn't a traditional kind of landscape or a foreground, middle ground, background. It just is kind of floating. You're very well spotted. Rachel is noticing the flora and fauna.
I think that was a great spotting of like the perspective. I went more so back to the basics. Like they both have some organic shapes at the top, and then they have one central figure in like the bottom center.
Yeah, Sarah's noticing elements of nature in both, and it's funny, Tanya, they're placed at the top, right? There's kind of leaves and birds, and they are at the top. I'm also noticing kind of the swatches or kind of splotches of color that are on both. They're different colors, but that kind of filling of the space around the main focus of the painting are kind of similar as well.
I'm noticing that the main, or this is probably an assumption, I was going to say the main figures are animals, but I don't know if they're the main figures or intended main figures. I'm assuming they are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that there are animals. There's also in both kind of inanimate objects, the spoons next to the snakes, and then it kind of looks like if this animal is, I know we debated bull or horse, kind of hard to tell as it looks like it's falling, but there looks like there's some kind of man-made material on sort of the underbelly of the bull. Yeah, and the bulls seem to be in jeopardy. The eggs are in jeopardy potentially in that nest with the snakes coming closer. So I love this idea of having an artist, especially when they're creating 2 works pretty close together. There's no way that the thought process that artist was in isn't carrying over into other artworks. So comparing 2 artworks is always a lot of fun for me. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives. With an artist like Tom Woodall, we're very, very lucky because we can actually hear directly from him. And he was featured in an episode of this podcast called The Savvy Painter. I know podcasts are all the rage currently, but they discuss something kind of interesting in terms of identity. And the podcast episode host early on in the episode says that Tom has strong opinions about the current state of the art world and the idea that one must be accredited by an institution in order to be called, and I'm using big air quotes, a legitimate artist. What does that term even mean? Talk about surrendering judgments. The standards that we set out to identify who is a legitimate artist are kind of interesting. In Tom's idea of that standard, he has kind of 2 parts. He thinks that you must be accredited by an institution, and it's interesting to me that that's one of the categories because his artwork is in some very big name institutions, but he also believes that not only must that institution legitimize you, you also need to make 100% of your living through your art. And this was a sticking point for me. I hate to disagree with Tom Woodall, the artist, but I know for some research that we pulled for another program, There was a Pew Research Center study in 2003, 2004. So actually just 10 years about after he painted his paintings. And they did a big survey of Americans about this idea of artist. They surveyed about, gosh, how many people? Millions and millions of people for this first round. And 57% of the people that they surveyed considered themselves as artistic, meaning they engage in some sort of art activity. So 57% is pretty good. That's what we like to see from an art museum. Of that portion of people who engage in artistic behaviors or activities, 28% called themselves artists, which is so interesting. So although you might do artistic activities, you might not classify yourself as big capital A artist. Of the people that do call themselves artists, only 32% make their living from selling their artwork. So Tom's idea and his kind of the judgments that we place on these different categories, he's thinking about, the Pew Center for Research is also thinking about how we classify people. And although he doesn't consider himself a legitimate artist, we do at the Haggerty, which is why we're very proud to have his works in our collection. And we can actually hear him speaking about our focus artwork today. So I'm going to exit out of the slideshow just really quick to share with you. Let me stop my screen share and then make sure I share the right screen for a little clippet of an interview that he had. So we'll just listen to about 3 minutes of this interview.
And my intention at that time was that I was painting that painting for all creative individuals, especially the younger artists that you had mentioned at the beginning of our interview. This disemboweled bovine is falling from the sky, and there are flames surrounding it as well. It's almost as if the painting were catching on fire here and there. And there are also little bits of gold here and there. And in the top register of the painting, we see foliage that's painted in black and white and a bird in the midst of that foliage. So that bird was intended to be a messenger between the worlds, between the world of the unconscious and conscious world. And the reason I titled that painting Circumstances Leading to the Discovery of the Unconscious is that coincidentally, when I was about to complete it, I had been reading a biography of Freud, and I was very impressed at the harrowing kind of crisis that he subjected to himself in the self-analysis period, where he pretty nearly lost his mind, as was the case with Jung as well. And it occurred to me that that kind of self-sacrifice and that sort of risk was really not very different than the crisis that precipitate all creative individuals. And obviously Freud and Jung were creative individuals. They created this whole thing, and their creativity was operating, is my assumption, according to the same principles that our creativity, it can't be any other way, operates. And so that had been a pretty difficult time for myself as well. I was going through the first phase of the then perpetually prolonged midlife crisis. It was a difficult time for me on many levels. It was a difficult time for me personally, financially, creatively, and that is the story behind that painting.
We got a little sneak peek of the title. Sorry about that, Tanya. We were going to have that be an utter surprise.
It's okay. Just pretend you didn't hear it.
Exactly. Oh, and I'll have to advance through. So it's always interesting to hear this story, especially with contemporary artists, of what they were thinking when they painted something. In my research area, that is not always the luxury that we can gather from the artist directly, those thoughts. So the artist Tom Woodall is still working in Los Angeles, as I said. His artwork has kind of taken a big shift, which makes sense. There about 30 years have passed since the paintings that we're focusing on today. And so he's using a lot more mixed media. You will notice from this little screenshot that I took, flowers are still a big part, a big motivation, a big inspiration for him. So although they look very different, you can see kind of a continuity of thought for him. And as he spoke about this kind of settling into his identity as an artist, he was still searching when he was just using paints for that true sense of self, for that idea that how to express himself. And a writer with Art Forum spoke about the difference between his works now and the works that he was making in the 90s. Richard Armstrong says of Woodall that his paintings continue to be oddities in a town of atypical, isolated artists, which is interesting in pandemic times, thinking about isolated artists. But the writer says the obsessiveness that previously compelled Woodall's handicraft, those very detailed paintings, have almost been converted to a feeling of frenzied expressionism, says this author. A feeling at once less specific and more ambitious than the painstaking labor categorized in the early paintings, and that the meaning of his symbols is of less interest than his decision as artist to use them, which is kind of a big thought to ponder. I'll leave us with this idea of encouraging you to surrender judgment when you're next in the museum gallery. I think we are used to just reading the information. You got a sneak peek of the title, but seeing the title, seeing the material, seeing the artist's name, and then kind of moving on. And what we in the museum field are trying to communicate out with those bits of information on the label is just a piece, but it shouldn't stop there, right? It should go a bit further. So I would encourage you to surrender your judgment about the artist, even about your reaction to the artwork or the space that you're in, or assumptions you make about the artist. Kind of keep digging. Don't stop at that surface level, but dig a little bit further to see and investigate your thoughts and feelings and what you can learn about the artist. And with that, I will pass it over to Tanya to do a participatory exercise.
Yeah, and I
think I accidentally muted you, sorry.
No, you're good.
Your screen popped up.
You're good. I was just going to say that I think that was a great segue into what we're going to be doing next, because similarly to how Tom Woodall has these, these judgments or these, I don't know, these ideas, particular ideas of what an artist should be and what his artist is and where his ideas come from, right? And we are probably also making some assumptions. There's this idea of critiquing, and a lot of times for a lot of us, right, I'll say myself, I won't speak for you, there's this inner critic that I saw a little bit pop up for Tom Woodall and some of the things that you presented, Christine. So for this next exercise, we're going to do a guided meditation that is about releasing judgment, but it's really about our inner critic, and we're going to actually invite in a little bit of judgment so that we can be able to release it. So please go to the next slide. Oh, and I just want to quickly mention that this guided meditation is adapted from Mark Coleman, who is an instructor of meditation. And if you are so inclined to keep doing research on releasing judgment, I have added the site for Mark Coleman. They have some really awesome guided meditations around this same realm.
Find a comfortable posture to start off with. In this meditation, we'll be inviting in judgment, just a little, as opposed to being afraid of it. In some traditions, there's a practice of inviting in that which we're troubled by, that which is challenging, that which may bring difficult emotions or difficult habits. So to start, find a sense of ease and well-being, and whatever allows you to focus on the inside. Take a couple of in-breaths and relax your body on the out-breaths. See if there's any place inside of you right now where there is a sense of ease, calm, well-being, and relaxation. Feel the peace and the stillness of the room. Find a mental place in which you can be comfortable with in this very moment. It may not be perfect, may not be totally as you like, but it is okay. Nothing needs to be different. And just replacing the body where you are able to connect with that sense of well-being or ease. Being attentive to your body and its sensations of sitting. See it arriving, grounding in your body, aware of your posture, aware of your breath. Notice the quality of the breath now. It may be different than this morning, perhaps. Bring your attention close to the breath, sensing, feeling, changing sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath. And when the attention wanders, without judgment, notice it and come back to your awareness of your breath. Now, stepping back into awareness, notice how the breath comes and goes in awareness. Sensations of the body feel in awareness. Sounds come and go in awareness. Let the sense of awareness to be spacious, open, and receptive. Notice how everything comes and goes in awareness. Imagine this awareness as vast as the sky, open, spacious, and you're present to everything that comes and goes within it. All sounds, your breath, sensations, feelings, thoughts. Awareness is your real home at this moment. It's your refuge. If you notice your mind wandering to a different place, gently redirect your attention to your awareness. And as you settle back into this sense of awareness, spacious like the sky, let everything come and go, and you coming and going within it. Now, I would like you to recall one of your judgments. One of those thoughts that perhaps you had today. And keeping this image of this sense of awareness like the spacious sky, see the thought, the belief, as a cloud. Thoughts such as, you should do so and so, or you're not enough in some way. And resting in awareness to see this thought come and perhaps dissolve just as clouds. If it dissolves, you can recall another judgment or the same judgment and see how it feels to really abide in awareness. See this judgment come and dissolve again. Just staying aware of your body and your breath, recall different judgments, noticing if you get pulled into believing them. Notice what happens when you believe them. Do you collapse in some way? Feel small? And just stepping back, as it were, in awareness, simply let the judgmental thoughts pass. You do not need to engage with it. Just allow it to come and dissolve on its own. If you're getting too grabbed and pulled into the judgments, come back to sensing the sky in spacious awareness. Perhaps focus on sounds or the silence around you. We practice knowing this refuge of awareness. Like this, identifying this entangle from the grip of our judgments. Judgments are like this, feel like this, or we can just name them judging ourselves for judging ourselves for not doing this exercise right, judging ourselves for not knowing what to do. In the last couple of minutes, just send yourself some loving kindness. Just call some phrases to mind to wish yourself well from this spacious place. May I be free from judgment? May I be free from the suffering of my judgmental mind? Maybe you can visualize yourself in a place where you feel that these judgments don't have any impact. Maybe you're lying in a hammock on the beach, something that gives you a bigger perspective. Spend some time visualizing that place. And soon we will regroup.
So whenever you're ready, just, slowly come back into it. I know it's kind of hard when you get into a meditative state to keep like engaging with a conversation. For now, I would like to just open up the floor if anyone has anything to share, any insights or anything that came up for them in their meditation. You can unmute yourself if you feel comfortable, or drop it in the chat. I'll model and share a little bit what I noticed. I definitely honed in on noticing like my body, and I noticed some tightness in my chest, and I was able to visualize the clouds really like coming and dissolving. And my clouds, the way it looked like in my mind, had like my judgments as like a title inside it, which was interesting because you don't plan your thoughts. So I thought that was interesting that came up. If anyone would like to share theirs, please do so.
I feel like you were talking directly to me, Tanya,
All
when
right.
you said.
Well, if anyone does, can you guys hear me still?
Yep. Can you hear me or no?
Oh.
Tanya might be frozen. Rachel, are you able to hear me? Oh, perfect. She can hear us both. So I was going to tell Tanya the part of her meditation where she mentions if you are worried about not doing this meditation correctly, let go of that judgment of yourself, which I found incredibly helpful because I've always struggled with meditation to do them correctly. So I love that Tanya included that piece.
I only heard a snippet of that. I got booted out for a second. I love that you were sharing that.
Yeah, the permission to have it be okay to not judge yourself when you're trying to meditate or trying to do mindfulness, that letting go of that judgment that you're not doing it right is always helpful when meditation practitioners include, I think.
Oh yeah, it can be so hard when you get into the rabbit hole of like, am I doing this meditation correctly? Am I not judging myself correctly? Which is a judgment, right? So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to invite you all to kind of respond to this meditation a little bit. So I've given the prompt of what did your inner critic look like? So if a certain imagery came to mind when you were visualizing your judgments, or you actually saw like a being, right, as your judgment, just go ahead and represent that in any way that looks to you, right? It doesn't have to be representational. It can be abstract, just any way that it looks like to you. And we can spend, let's say, around 5-6 minutes on this. And I'll count you down. I'm going to be sharing what I create on the screen that's titled Art. Just so you all know, it's been about 2 minutes. It's been like 3, 4 more minutes, depending on how people feel. Let's take about another minute and a half, and then we can regroup. Let's take these last around 30 seconds to wrap up wherever you're at. Your image does not have to be finished. We're just going to regroup again at that time. Were you able to hear that? That was my Google timer going off. All right. Well, I do want to invite you all to share any words that came to mind, or anything in terms of imagery. I can model again and share mine. Like I mentioned, oh, yay. Wait, can you move it a little forward? There we go. Can you describe it a little, Christine?
Yeah, I drew rocks. I didn't have any green markers, so my moss is kind of red. And then I decided that they should be kind of sitting in a body of water. So I was just starting to add kind of ripples from them sitting.
Nice. I just saw your comment. Yeah, I like the, you said red moss?
Yeah, I had to make do with my drawing implement, but I kind of like the red moss. And Sarah said hers were stormy trees in a whirlpool. I love that.
Very interesting. Any others that came up? Other imagery or anything else that you'd like to share? Colors or textures, feelings that came up? Mine, as I wait for others to share, mine was a cloud, but I feel like mine ended up being like a cloud getting like swooshed around or moving or something, and there's a lot of lines going around. There we go. And I titled mine with one of my judgments. All right, going once, going twice. You can always add anything that you'd like to share later on as well. All right, so for this portion of art and mindfulness pairing, we're going to be, oh, I see Sarah added something in the chat. I used pencil, but could have embellished it. That's all good. Oh, you know what? Is that a judgment that you're that you're putting on yourself, right? You can totally add it, and these don't have to be done. This is an exercise that you can do over and over again, and the inner critic might look differently, right, when you do the art portion. Every single time. So thank you for sharing that. I enjoyed it and wanted to carry on. Yay! All right, so for this portion of the session, we're gonna be looking at the artwork that we had already seen from Tom Woodall, but we are going to be looking at sections of the artwork really closely, and I'm going to be prompting you with some questions for close observation. All right, so take a good look at the full artwork. All right, let's go to the next slide. So what shapes are you noticing in this section of the painting? What types of lines are you noticing in this section of the painting? Triangles. I'm noticing some curvy lines. Undefined edges. Misshapen circles. Ghostly leaves, and the black almost looks like a volcanic eruption with fire. That was very specific. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see. What colors are you noticing in this section of the painting? What textures did the artist create in this section of the painting? So textures and colors. Gold, green, gray, blue, blue, green, black. Any textures anyone is noticing? Smooth, leaf seems smooth. I see some gold, and it looks a little rough, maybe because of the like brush stroke. All right, let's go to the next one. What values, as in shades and tints, did the artist use in this section of the painting? Have you seen any recurring colors or shapes? Any colors that you've seen before that you're seeing here? What kinds of shades are you seeing? Values are different or similar. Seeing some gray. I'm seeing some blue. Or a lot of blue, I should say. All right, let's go to the next square. All right, this one. How might this square be similar or different to the rest? Oh, Sarah said for the last one, they saw orange. I think it's visible on the bold 2 diagonal lines. Okay. How might this square or this portion of the artwork be similar or different to the rest? Similar colors, not as translucent, formal variety, more detail. I was thinking it shows more of what we assume to be a bowl than the other squares do. Texture. All right, and then the next square. All right, and then this last square. Have you noticed any details that you hadn't noticed when you first saw the full artwork? The horn! Yeah, I hadn't really taken a look at the hooves either. They look a little differently. One is like more closed in and the other is more opened up. The split hooves, yeah. The detail in the hooves. Any others that you notice? All right, for our last one, and we'll send people off with this one, is what would you title this artwork? I know you might have gotten a sneak peek, but that's okay. And you can feel free to unmute yourselves if you come up with a title. Falling donkey, falling bull on fire. Free fall.
I like Sarah's in trouble. Agree.
I thought, I don't know, maybe this makes me a little mean. I thought I've fallen and I can't get up. Like the announcements or the commercials.
Rachel's channeling some pop music. Oops, I did it again. I think let's leave it on that one. The actual title. Dun, 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 dun. Circumstances leading to the discovery of the unconscious. We got a little sneak peek with the artist saying where he got that title from. I would encourage people to always, I am constantly picking new titles for artwork when I am in museum galleries. I think it's a fun activity. We wanted to close out with a pretty short poem. Yeah, that's why he's an artist and I'm not. Titles are not, and some artists didn't pick their titles. Fun fact, sometimes it's the gallery owner, especially for older artwork. So that's not always the case, but just like naming crayons, it takes a special talent sometimes. I found this, it's a pretty short poem from a poet that is on Instagram, actually, Nikita Gill. But I thought it was such a great pairing, and we'll do a poem pairing for each of our sessions. This one is called The Making of You. The universe had to fall apart into dust first to become its majestic, incredible, infinite self. What makes you think this breaking, this trauma, this destruction won't be the making of a more powerful you too? So maybe that bowl will be even more powerful on the other side of things.
I think it will be.
Call to action. Tanya, I'll have you take this part away.
Yeah, so if we can go to the next slide, we're just thinking through like what kinds of things can you take away from this session, right? So thinking about surrendering judgment in your daily life. So what can you do to notice and to diminish this judgment to not only to yourself and to the people around you, right? And your surroundings. So you can use mindful observation just like we did in the very beginning of this session, right? Taking even just 1 minute of just looking at things or being mindful in one moment and observing what that moment entails without necessarily labeling anything from it. And we'd like to know what you think from that, right? Just use that practice. Maybe you can even use the inner critic mindfulness practice as well. Try to notice your judgments and kind of let them come by and leave just as they came.
Fabulous. So things to do before our next session. You'll see a poll that just popped up to let us know what you thought of today's session. And if you missed last month's session, you can find this session once the recording is ready and last month's session on our Hagerty Museum of Art YouTube page. So I've included the kind of URL, but if you search for the Hagerty Museum of Art, you should see that pull up with our past session and any future sessions that we do. So feel free to check that out. Rachel, in the comments, thank you, Rachel, for posting. If you want to drop in the chat also, ideas or suggestions for future programming, that would be great. I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. And our next session, Tanya, do you want to give a little shout out to the theme and the date?
Yes, so our next session will be on attunement. So how we can, you know, create this sense of relationship building, not only with ourselves, but with others around us, so that we can create better environments in any aspect of our lives.